The night my home felt like a stranger's. Sugar. Let me tell you something straight out the gate. I never thought I'd be packing a weekend bag in the same house, where I buried my husband's boots in the backyard and marked my grandbaby's height on the pantry wall. But life's funny like that. One minute you're home, and the next minute you're tolerant. It started on a Thursday morning, sunlight crawling across my kitchen tiles like it always had. I was buttering toast when my daughter, Karen, yes, that's really her name, leaned against the counter with that tight smile she gets when she's already decided something for me. "Mom," she said, dragging the word out, "I need a small favor." I should have known right then. Favors in this family never came small. They came wrapped in politeness and paid for in pieces of your pride. She told me her in-laws were visiting. Just the weekend, needed space, my space. "You can stay with Gladys," she said, like she was suggesting a spa retreat. "It's just temporary." Temporary? That word hit me sideways. I looked around my kitchen, the chipped mug. The calendar still flipped to March even though it was April. My chair at the table worn smooth by decades of waiting. I felt something slip. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter. Something colder. I wanted to argue. Lord knows I did. But wisdom sometimes looks like silence. So I nodded. Packed light. Left my house keys on the hook like I'd be back any minute. As I stepped out the door, Karen didn't hug me. Didn't even look up from her phone. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about space. And by Sunday, I was going to find out exactly what it was about. Whether I was ready or not. The guest room that wasn't mine. Gladys meant well, she always did. But her guest room smelled like mothballs and old apologies, and the bed squeaked every time I shifted, like it was tattling on me for being there. I lay awake that first night staring at the ceiling fan wobble, my mind running laps I never signed up for. Funny thing about being pushed out of your own home, you start noticing how people talk to you. Karen's voice replayed in my head, soft but firm, like she was negotiating with a child, just for the weekend. Like dignity had a return policy. Gladys brought me chamomile tea the next morning. "You okay, Mabel?" she asked. Bless her heart for asking, but I gave her the same answer I gave myself. "I'm fine." That's a lie women my age learn to tell early and often. Saturday crept in slow and heavy. I tried to busy my hands-folded laundry that wasn't mine, wiped counters already clean. But my thoughts kept drifting back home. Were they sleeping in my bed? Sitting in my chair? Laughing in my living room like I was some old coat tossed in the closet? I called Karen around noon. Straight to voicemail. Called again, nothing. That's when I noticed my bank app lighting up with a notification. A charge I didn't recognize. Home improvement store. A big one. My stomach dropped. They weren't just borrowing space. They were making changes. I sat there on Gladys's couch, tea gone cold, staring at that screen like it had just blinked first in a long game of chicken. What exactly were they fixing in my house? And why didn't anyone think to ask me? When walls start talking. By Saturday evening, my nerves were stretched thinner than cheap lace. I couldn't shake that charge from my mind. Home improvement stores aren't for light bulbs and goodwill. They're for decisions. Permanent ones. I called again. This time Karen answered, breathless like she'd been caught running uphill. "Mom, I'm busy," she snapped before I could finish saying hello. "Busy in my house. I just got a bank alert," I said, keeping my voice even. Years of marriage taught me that calm scares people more than yelling. There's a charge I don't recognize. A pause. Too long. "Oh, that," she said finally. "We had to replace something." "Don't worry about it." "Replace what?" I wanted to ask, but she was already halfway out the door of the conversation. "You'll see when you get back," she added, like she was doing me a favor. That night, I dreamed my house was whispering to me, walls creaking like old bones, doors opening without my say-so. In the dream, every room had been rearranged, like my life was a puzzle someone else thought they could solve better. Sunday morning, I put on my good coat, the one my husband bought me after his first pension check. I told Gladys I was heading home early. She gave me that look the one women give each other when they know something's gone sideways but don't push. When I pulled into my driveway, my heart thumped hard enough to shake my ribs. There was a strange car parked where my roses used to bloom, and through my front window, I saw movement. People. In my space. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, realizing something deep and painful. Whatever they changed inside that house, it wasn't just furniture, and I wasn't sure I was welcome anymore. The door that didn't open easy. I sat in that car longer than I cared to admit, engine ticking like it was counting down to something ugly. My hands were shaking, but my spine stayed straight. Age gives you that trembling hands, iron backbone. When I finally stepped out, the house looked the same on the outside. White siding, blue shutters, the kind of place people drive past and think, someone loved living there. What they don't see is when love gets rearranged without permission. I walked up to my front door and reached for my key. It didn't turn. I tried again. Nothing. Now, I'm not proud of the sound I made, then somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. My own front door had locked me out like I was a stranger selling magazine subscriptions. I knocked hard. The door swung open, and there stood Karen's mother-in-law, Carol, smiling like she'd just won bingo. "Oh, you're back early," she said, eyes flicking to my suitcase. "We didn't expect you until tonight." We. That word felt like a slap. I stepped inside without waiting for permission. And that's when I saw it. My living room wasn't my living room anymore. The couch had been pushed against a different wall. My framed photos, wedding day, babies, funerals were gone. In their place hung generic art from a discount store, beige, soulless. Karen rushed in from the kitchen. "Mom, relax. It's just temporary." "Temporary doesn't involve new locks." "What did you change?" I asked softly. She avoided my eyes. "Just updates." "Updates, that's what people call it when they erase you slowly." I realized then this weekend eviction wasn't about guests. It was a test. And standing there, surrounded by strangers in my own home, I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't draw a line now, I'd disappear completely. The price of silence. I walked through that house like I was touring a museum exhibit titled Someone Else's Life. Each step felt heavier than the last. The hallway runner my husband picked out gone, replaced with something stiff and gray, like it had no memory in it at all. Karen kept talking, words tumbling out fast. "We just thought it'd be easier this way, Mom. Less clutter, more space." Clutter. That's what she called my life. I stopped in the kitchen. My kitchen. Or what used to be. The yellow curtains I sewed myself were missing. In their place hung sleek blinds, sharp and cold. Even the spice rack had been rearranged. I couldn't find the cinnamon without searching. That's how you know someone doesn't see you anymore, when they change things they don't even use. "You spent my money," I said quietly. Karen crossed her arms, defensive. "It's still your house. We're just helping." Helping feels a lot like taking when you don't ask first. Carol chimed in from the living room, voice syrupy. "At your age, change can be good. Keeps things fresh." At your age, I swallowed hard. There it was, the unspoken thought finally said out loud. I wanted to scream, cry, throw every beige pillow through the window, but I didn't. Silence can be a weapon if you know how to hold it. I nodded, smiled even. "Well," I said, "I'm tired. I'll rest." Karen looked relieved. Thought she'd won. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was counting. Counting changes. Counting slights. Counting receipts. Because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means planning. And as I lay in that unfamiliar version of my own bedroom, staring at a lamp I never chose, one thought settled in clear as day. They thought this weekend was over. But my patience was a lesson they forgot I learned. Monday morning came in quiet, the way trouble likes to do, soft-footed and smug. Karen left early for work, heels clicking like punctuation marks on a sentence she thought she'd finished. Carol and her husband followed soon after, all smiles and thank yous, promising to keep in touch. I smiled back, sweet, polite, dangerous. The house exhaled once they were gone. Or maybe that was just me. I made coffee the old way, ignoring the new machine they'd bought without asking. As it brewed, I sat at the table and pulled out a little notebook from my purse, the one I've kept since my husband passed. Dates, notes, numbers. Wisdom doesn't shout at documents. First thing I wrote down: changed locks without consent. Second, used my funds. Third, removed personal property. People forget something about women my age. We didn't get this old by being foolish. I raised children, buried a man I loved, paid off a mortgage dime by dime. I know contracts. I know leverage. By noon, Karen called. "Everything okay, Mom?" "Oh, just peachy," I said. "House feels different." She laughed, light and careless. "You'll get used to it." That's when I knew. This wasn't temporary in her mind. This was a soft takeover. Ease me out gently. Make me smaller without me noticing. That afternoon, I drove to the bank, sat across from a young man who called me ma'am, and listened closely. I asked questions, calm ones, the kind that opened doors. By the time I got home, I had answers. And options. I stood in my living room, my rearranged, erased living room man touched the wall where my wedding photo used to hang. They thought age made me slow. What it really gave me was patience sharpened into steel, and the next move was already forming. Paper trails and quiet power. Tuesday morning, I woke up before the sun, the way I used to when the babies were small, and the world still needed me early. I sat at the kitchen table, my table. No matter how much they tried to modernize it and spread out paperwork like a general planning a campaign. Deed, bank statements, utility bills. Every document with my name printed bold and legal. Funny how paper remembers what people try to forget. I called my lawyer next. Haven't needed him in years, but his voice hadn't changed, still steady, still respectful. That alone told me I was doing the right thing. "Sounds like unauthorized use and financial overreach," he said after I explained. "Possibly elder exploitation." That phrase landed heavy. Elder exploitation. Words nobody likes, but truth doesn't worry about comfort. I thanked him and hung up, heart pounding but clear. No shouting, no dramatics, just steps. Measured ones. Karen stopped by that evening. She noticed the documents right away. "What's all this?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, just organizing," I said. "You know, clarity." Her smile tightened. "You don't need a lawyer, Mom." I looked up then, met her eyes. Really met them. "Everyone needs a lawyer," I said softly, "especially when family forgets boundaries." She laughed it off, but her hands shook. She knew something had shifted. That night, I replaced my wedding photo myself, hung it crooked, just the way it always was. A quiet act of defiance. Because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just sits at the table, paperwork in hand, waiting, and I was done waiting for permission. When the truth stops being polite. By Wednesday, the air in the house had changed. You could feel it thick, cautious, like everyone was tiptoeing around an unspoken storm. Karen came by after work again, but this time she didn't kick off her shoes like she used to. She stayed standing, ready to leave. "Mom," she said, sighing, "you're making this bigger than it needs to be." I smiled, not sweet, not mean, just honest. "No, honey, I'm finally making it the right size." She rolled her eyes. "It was just a weekend. You're overreacting." That's when I pulled out the bank statement and slid it across the table. No drama, no raised voice. "You spent my money without asking. Changed my locks. Removed my belongings. That's not a favor, that's control." Her face drained of color. "We were helping you transition." Transition. Another word people use when they don't want to say replacement. "Transition to what?" I asked. "Being a guest in my own life." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Silence stretched between us, sharp and necessary. I leaned back, folded my hands. I've already spoken to the bank and my lawyer. That did it. You wouldn't do that to family, she snapped. I met her anger with calm. Family doesn't do this either. She left without another word, door slamming hard enough to rattle the new art off the wall. It fell crooked. I didn't fix it. Because sometimes truth isn't polite. Sometimes it's loud enough to crack the illusion. And that crack was about to spread. The things people say when they're cornered. Thursday brought phone calls. Lots of them. Karen, her husband, even Carol, suddenly sweet as pie. When people feel the ground shift under their feet, they start talking fast and meaning very little. Carol left a voicemail. We never meant any harm. At your age, stability is important. That phrase again. At your age. Like time had turned me fragile, instead of forged. Karen came by in the afternoon, eyes red, voice sharp. Do you know how this looks? Calling lawyers banks? People will think we're taking advantage of you. I raised an eyebrow. If the shoe fits, don't be surprised when folks notice the footprint. She paced my living room like a caged cat. You're being stubborn. No, I said calmly. I'm being clear. That's when the masks slipped. You can't live alone forever, she blurted. What if something happens? We were just preparing. Preparing to decide for me. Preparing to manage me. Preparing to erase me gently. I stood then, slow and steady. I survived childbirth without epidurals, buried my husband without falling apart, and paid for this house in full. Don't confuse my wrinkles with weakness. Her eyes filled. Anger gave way to fear. Good. Fear means they finally understand stakes. She left again, quieter this time. That night, I sat alone and listened to the house settle, creaks, sighs, familiar sounds returning. But I knew this wasn't over yet. Because when people realize they've gone too far, they either apologize or they push harder. And I had a feeling which one Karen was choosing. The reckoning weekend. Friday morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that makes the world look sharp and honest. I brewed my coffee the old way, ignoring the fancy new machine still blinking like it had no idea who really owned the house. I sat at the table, notebook open, pen ready. The stage was set, and this weekend would tell me everything. Karen called around 10, hesitant, quiet. Mom, can we talk? I agreed, told her to come over. But this time, I wasn't smiling. I wasn't polite. I was prepared. She walked in, shoes off this time, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. She expected me to be vulnerable, maybe even apologetic. I poured us both tea, sat down, and looked her square in the eye. I've been quiet all week, I said. But quiet doesn't mean weak. It means I've been watching, counting, thinking. Her lips pressed together. I could see the fight to form an excuse, a justification, a story where she was still the hero. This house isn't yours to play with, I continued. This weekend, it was supposed to be temporary. You crossed lines. Lines you can't just erase. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. That pause was victory in itself. The pause told me she realized I wasn't backing down. I thought I was helping, she said finally. You were helping yourselves, I replied. And trying to shrink me. But some favors cost more than money. They cost dignity. Mine isn't for sale. Her face fell. Silence stretched again. It wasn't the end of the argument, but it was the beginning of a reckoning. And as she sat there, finally listening, I knew something critical had changed. The question lingering in the room. Would they ever truly see me or just keep trying to redraw my boundaries? Reclaiming my home and myself. Saturday morning, the sunlight spilled across my living room just the way it always had, warm and unapologetic. I walked through the house slowly, touching the things that were mine: the worn armchair, the kitchen counter with its faint scratches from years of family breakfasts, the little nook where my husband's ashes used to sit. Every corner whispered memories, and for the first time that week, The house felt like mine again. Karen and Carol hadn't shown up. I hadn't called them. Let them stew. Let them think. Sometimes the best lesson comes in silence. I made pancakes for myself. Soft, buttery, golden like I remembered from my children's birthdays. And I smiled, not because I was happy they'd left, but because I remembered who I was. A woman who had survived loss, betrayal, and the slow attempts of others to erase her. By mid-morning, Karen called. Her voice was smaller this time. Mom, I wanted to apologize. We overstepped. I listened. Let her speak. Let her unpack the weight of her actions. And when she was done, I said what needed to be said. Thank you for saying that. But apologies aren't just words. They're actions. Respecting me and my home, that's how you'll show it. She paused, swallowed, and finally whispered, I understand. I hung up and walked to my window, looking out at my garden. The roses were still alive. The weeds I hadn't gotten to yet reminded me that life keeps growing, even when neglected. Some lessons cost nothing but awareness. Others cost dignity. I had almost paid with mine. But not today. I had reclaimed my home, my life, and my voice. And in that quiet victory, I realized the hardest part of family isn't love, it's knowing when to stand firm so that love doesn't trample you. Because at the end of the day, respect is non-negotiable, and I would never forget that again. The question that lingers, when people try to rewrite your story, do you let them, or do you take the pen back yourself?